Chapter 5. Simple Interest, Compound Interest, and Annuity. While we associate simple interest and compound interest largely with banking transactions, the usage of these concepts is, however, not limited to banks and financial institutions alone. It might be interesting to know that the first usage of interest, not necessarily in monetary form, dates back to 5000 BC. Let us go ahead and learn more on interest in various forms and their practical applications. Prerequisites. As a prerequisite, you are required to be familiar with basic mathematics, use of indices, learning objectives. At the end of this chapter, you will learn concept of interest and related terms, computation of simple interest, computation of compound interest, the concept of annuity and its applications, the concept of present value and future value of a sum and annuities. Interest is a reward for the use of capital. In other words, it is the charge paid for the use of borrowed money. The person who lends the money is called the creditor or lender, and the one who borrows it is called the debtor or borrower. The money borrowed is called the principal. The time for which the money is borrowed is known as the time period. Rate of interest is the reward that the borrower has to pay the lender on the borrowed money. It tells us how much percentage of the borrowed money is given as the reward. Amount is the total amount that the borrower returns at the end of the time period. It is the sum of the principal and the interest. For example, let's say Ram lends rupees 1000 to Sachin for a period of 5 years at 10% interest per annum. Here, rupees 1000 is the principal. 5 years is the time period. 10% per annum is the rate of interest. This means that 10% of the money borrowed is paid as interest every year. Types of interest. The interest on the borrowed money can be calculated in two different ways, depending on whether or not the principal is kept constant during the time period under consideration. The two types are simple interest and compound interest. Let us discuss these topics separately. Simple interest. Simple interest is calculated on the original principal, that is, the principal is assumed to be constant throughout the time period. As we saw earlier, the interest calculation depends on three factors, that is, the principal, time period, and the rate of interest. The simple interest is directly proportional to the principal. This means, if the money borrowed increases, the interest earned or paid at the end of the time period increases. The simple interest is directly proportional to the time period. That is, the amount earned or paid as interest increases as the time period increases. The simple interest is directly proportional to the interest rate. That is, if the money is borrowed at a higher rate of interest, the interest earned or paid is higher. By combining these relationships, we can calculate the simple interest using the formula SI is equal to PTR divided by 100. It should be remembered that if the rate of interest is given as per annum, it means that the interest is calculated per year and hence the time period must be expressed in years. Similarly, if the rate of interest is given per month, then the time must be expressed in months and so on. Let's say a sum of rupees 16,000 is lent out for a period of 8 months at 3% per annum rate of interest. What is the simple interest received at the end of the time period? We know that the simple interest is calculated using the formula SI is equal to PTR divided by 100. Here we see that the time period is in terms of months. However, the rate of interest is per annum, and hence the time period must be converted in terms of years. 8 months can be expressed as 8 by 12 in years. Substituting the values, we have SI is equal to 16,000 into 8 by 12 into 3 divided by 100, which is equal to rupees 320. Hence, the lender gets an additional rupees 320 at the end of 8 months. Other important formulas. The final amount to be repaid at the end of the time period is the sum of the principal and the interest calculated on the principal for the time period at a given rate of interest. That is, A is equal to P plus PTR divided by 100. This can also be expressed as A is equal to P into 1 plus TR divided by 100. For example, find the amount to be repaid at the end of 5 years if a sum of rupees 10,000 is borrowed at a rate of interest of 6% per annum. Amount is calculated using the formula A is equal to P into 1 plus TR divided by 100. P is equal to 10,000, T is equal to 5, and R is equal to 6. Substituting the values, we have A is equal to 10,000 into 1 plus 5 into 6 divided by 100, which implies that the amount is equal to rupees 13,000. If we have the final amounts that will be obtained after 2 different time periods on the same principal at the same rate of interest, then the rate of interest can be calculated using the relation R is equal to A2 minus A1 divided by A1 into T2 minus A2 into T1 into 100. For example, if a certain principal amounts to rupees 1,600 after 2 years and to rupees 2,050 after 5 years, then find the rate of interest. We can find R using the relation R is equal to A2 minus A1 divided by A1 into T2 minus A2 into T1 into 100. Substituting the values, we get R is equal to 2050 minus 1600 divided by 1600 into 5 minus 2050 into 2 into 100, which implies R is equal to 11.53%. If 2 different principals are lent out at 2 different rates of interest, then the effective rate of interest on the overall principal, that is, the sum of both the principals, can be found using the relation R is equal to P1 into R1 plus P2 into R2 divided by P1 plus P2, where R1 is the rate of interest on P1, R2 is the rate of interest on P2, and R is the rate of interest on P1 plus P2. For example, let a sum of rupees 10,000 be lent at 2% rate of interest and let another sum of rupees 20,000 be lent at 3% rate of interest. Find the effective rate of interest on the entire sum lent. The effective rate of interest on the overall principal can be found using the relation R is equal to P1 into R1 plus P2 into R2 divided by P1 plus P2. Substituting the values, we have R is equal to 10,000 into 2 plus 20,000 into 3 divided by 10,000 plus 20,000, which implies R is equal to 2.667%. Let's take a break. Try to match the terms asked for on the left to the formulas needed to find them given on the right.